So we know we are releasing carbon into the atmosphere. Well, what is the effects of that? Have we actually been able to see the impacts of warming over the last 200 years? And the answer to that is yes, right? Climate change is not something that we think of as only happening in the future. It's not something that we need to, it's not something that we need to only prevent in the future, right? It's not something that we are trying to make not happen. It's something that is already happening, and it's something that we are trying to minimize the effect of, but it's happening right now. Thousands of published observations suggest that yes, the climate is warming. Some effects of this that we've been able to measure is that ice all around Earth is melting. Remember when we talked about glaciers and ice sheets, I said the two largest ice sheets on Earth right now are Antarctica and Greenland. Well, the Antarctic ice sheets are melting, and they're also thinning and they're disappearing. So this image is showing the thickness of the Antarctic ice sheets and how they've been changing over time. Any of the circles that are blue, those ice sheets are actually gaining thickness, whereas any of the circles that are red are losing thickness. And you can see the vast majority of the ice sheets on Antarctica are reduced in thickness. They are melting, and that water is going into the oceans. The same story is happening on Greenland. Greenland also covered in an ice sheet, but by looking at the summer melt line, or during summer, where's the edge of the ice, we can see that it is getting farther and farther and farther away from the coastline, melting farther and farther inland. So over time, yes, right, absolutely, the ice sheet on Greenland is melting. We are seeing that today. And it's not just land ice we have to worry about. Sea ice is also melting. So the Arctic Ocean during the winter time is often completely covered in ice, but during the summertime, that ice melts back, not all the way, right? But it does melt back a little bit. And we can see from these two images shown, one is from March 1998 on the right, and the other one is March 2013 on the left. And you can see that taken, the same year, the same season, the amount of ice has drastically reduced. It looked like it's almost halved in these pictures. Right? And we do predict that somewhere in the not too distant future, in the summertime, the Arctic will have no ice at all. It'll completely melt. It's not just the ice sheets and the sea ice that are melting, it's also all of the rest of the ice, right? The snow is melting, the glaciers are melting. So I tell so many people, if you want to see a glacier, do it now, because the glaciers are melting, which means that they're getting harder and harder to access. Right now, there's so many glaciers that you can just drive to, you can walk up to, and the coming decades, that might not be possible anymore. So if you want to see a glacier, do it now. They're so cool to witness. So for example, the Muir Glacier in Alaska has retreated 12 kilometers over the past 60 to 70 years. And on a global basis, about 100 cubic miles of glacial ice melts every single year. And this cumulative decrease in glaciers is very visible. Right? When I lived in Seattle, Washington, I used to be part of a class that took a field trip up to the glacier on Mount Rainier. And the teacher of that class had been taking students on this field trip for so long. I'm going to stop the share so you can actually see me when I'm talking. So the teacher for that class had been taking students up to see the glacier on Mount Rainier for decades. And he said that in the beginning, they could just drive up the road, park on the bridge, and they would all look at the glacier and they could talk about the glacier. When I got to go on that field trip, we drove up the road, we parked on the bridge, and there was no glacier there. And the instructor said, look up that valley. If we were to walk up a few miles, you'd see the glacier there. But we could no longer see it without hiking to it. Right, so there's this visible decrease in the extent of glaciers on land. I'll share my screen for you again. All right, so yes, ice is melting. We know that's causing sea level rise, but that's not the only problem with global warming, as global warming suggests the Earth is warming. So this is an image showing an average change in global temperatures since the year 1880. And you can see that all around the world, most places are warming. Okay? And often when people think about global warming, they say, oh, you know, it's only going to increase by a few degrees. That won't change much, right? It'll just make it a little warmer, but everyday life will still go about as usual. And that's not the case, right? Just a few degrees can actually substantially change our way of life. And I'm going to give you two examples for that here. Now, these are not the most important examples, right? But they are examples that hit home for us in Georgia, just to show how our everyday way we live is going to change because of climate change. So here in Georgia, we have a battle with mosquitoes. I know that in the summertime, when it's hot and it's wet, I can't go into my backyard because the mosquitoes have completely taken it over. It is their yard for the summer months. It's only been recently that I've been able to actually go into the backyard and enjoy my time back there again. And mosquitoes have a specific temperature threshold when they thrive. And because the earth is warming, more days out of the year are warm enough to be what we call mosquito days. And so scientists have been tracking mosquito days since the 1980s in many different cities. And one of the closest cities that I was able to find data for in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is the black line on this graph, has seen an increase in 33 mosquito days since the 1980s. Right? Since the 1980s, we have an entire month more of mosquito days. That's an entire month that I cannot go into my backyard because it is controlled by the mosquitoes. Right? And that's just over 40 years. Right? In our lifetime, there might be another month of mosquito days or another month of mosquito days. Another way global warming is impacting our everyday lives is with our recreation. Okay, so it's actually becoming too hot for high school football and other outdoor high school sports. The state of Georgia leads the nation in heat-related deaths of high school football players. Because of this, since 2012, there have been statewide heat rules that prevent heat injury and death. And part of those rules is that players can't practice when the WBGT, which is just a way of measuring temperature, is greater than 92. Okay. This means that if you played an outdoor sport in high school in Georgia, you should have gone inside when it was really hot. Your coach is not allowed to have you practice outside when it is hot because so many people have died in Georgia because of that. And this figure I'm showing is the projected change in number of days greater than 95 degrees Fahrenheit predicted into the year 2041 to 2070. So within our lifetimes, hopefully, you can see that where we live is going to have about 30 more days where people can't practice sports outside, 30 more days when we can't practice football here in Georgia. So 30 more days of mosquitoes, 30 more days of mosquitoes, 30 less days of outdoor sports, right? Climate change, not a fun thing.